Students, in the previous video lectures, we have covered the first three sections of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. They were the burial of the dead, that is the first section. The second section was a game of chess, and the third was the fire sermon. Now, let's cover and understand section number 4 and 5. Section number 4 titles Death by Water. Students, it is the shortest section of the poem and it tells the story of Phlebas, who is a drowned sailor, and the story serves as a reminder of human mortality. Eliot uses this short passage as a pause in the poem, a quiet moment showing how all worldly concerns like profit and loss become meaningless in the face of death. It also prepares the way for the purification and renewal that the world will move toward next. World of the poem will move toward next. The next section, that is the fifth one, which titles What the Thunder Said. Students, please note that this is the final and the most intense section. It presents a world of drought, fear, and spiritual dryness, creating an image of complete wasteland. But unlike the earlier parts, this section slowly moves towards hope. The thunder's message, taken from the Upanishads, which are give, sympathize, and control, offers a spiritual path for renewal. The poem ends with the possibility of peace. Let's move to section 4 of The Wasteland, Death by Water. This is a very brief but deeply symbolic segment, even though it is the shortest part of the poem, but it carries immense weight, almost like a warning, a reminder, a moment of silence in the midst of chaos. When we see the opening scene, Philebus the Phoenician, a fortnight dead. Here Eliot brings us the story of Philebus, who, like I just told you, was a young Phoenician sailor who had drowned. He had been dead for 2 weeks. Notice how abruptly the poem begins. There is no introduction, no emotion, just a simple fact of death. Now, what has Philebus forgotten here? He has forgotten, if you read the small stanza, you'll find that he has forgotten the cry of gulls, the deep sea swell, profit and loss. So, this is extremely important, as in death, he has forgotten both nature and the worldly concerns that dominate human life. You know, students, Eliot is quietly making a point here, as in the end, the things we run after throughout our life, that is, gain, loss, ambition, success, it just suddenly disappears. And there is an imagery of sea when Eliot writes, a current under sea picked his bones in whispers. This is an extremely powerful imagery. The sea is personified as something that slowly picks at the bones, gentle, quite inevitable. And if we see that death is really not violent here, it is calm, almost natural. As his body moves with the current, as he rose and fell, that you can read from the stanza, as he rose and fell, Philebus goes through the stages of life again. And what are those stages? Youth, adulthood, old age. These are the three stages. It suggests that in death, time collapses. Everything is equalized. Now, this section does two major things. First, it acts as a moral reminder. Now, that is the recurring theme of spiritual barrenness in the poem, is contrasted here with the cleansing, purifying image of water. And the second thing that it does is it interrupts the chaos of the modern world with a moment of reflection. This is Eliot's way of telling the reader, what is it telling? Stop, look, and think. So, like I just told you, this little piece is like a warning to the reader. The final lines shift the tone directly. Gentile or Jew, O you who turn the wheel and look to windward, consider Phlebas. When this poem is actually addressing us, is asking us, this you is who here? The other readers. O you who turn the wheel and look to windward, consider Phlebas. This is the poem addressing us. Eliot is saying that you are busy turning the wheel. Means you're working, you're striving, you're hustling. You are looking ahead, planning and worrying all your life. So now he is asking us to stop, pause, think of Philebus. He was once handsome and tall, full of life, strength, youth, but he too is gone. This is not meant to be, morbid. It's meant to be grounding. He wants us, Eliot wants us to confront the truth of mortality and emptiness of material obsession. So, what do we really take from this short but haunting section? We come to know that Philebus stands for the wasted lives of modern men. Water, which is usually a symbol of renewal, here becomes a symbol of both destruction and potential cleansing. The tone here is elegiac, calm, reflective, and not dramatic because nothing as such is happening. It is just, naturally, it is going, in a flow. And the passage is a moment of stillness, like I just told you, that it is, it's a pause before the final section, what the thunder said. Eliot here, through this small piece, it reminds us that the modern world, with its constant pursuit of gain, its spiritual emptiness, is its mechanical rush, must someday face the reality of death. And only by considering this truth can we begin to seek genuine renewal. Now, students, let's study the last and the most intense section of the wasteland. That is what the thunder said. Here you will see a transformation from hopelessness to hope. And let me read a little bit of a very small stanza for understanding. After the torchlight red on sweaty faces, after the frosty silence in the gardens, after the agony in stony places, the shouting and the crying, prison and palace, reverberation of thunder of spring over distant mountains, he who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying with a little patience. These lines, they describe a kind of a world which is filled with fear, exhaustion, and spiritual crisis. And Eliot is giving us a series of images that feel chaotic and broken. The very first line, it suggests violence, panic, and it shows how people are running in fear. This red torchlight, it creates an atmosphere of danger. The scene suddenly shifts to coldness and emptiness, and there is a garden, which usually a symbol of life, but here it symbolizes silence and death. It shows suffering in a harsh, barren landscape, and there are stony places. These landscape is full of it's all stony places, and these stony places remind us of both physical dryness and emotional hardness. And there is, of course, a chaos everywhere among common people and powerful ones as well. Means this crisis is affecting all the classes. No, it's not really sparing anyone. And the common people, they represent prison because they're trapped in a prison-like state. And the powerful ones who are living in palaces also, they have also been, you know, affected. So there is a sound of thunder and which hints at renewal or divine intervention. But it is still far away. not yet reaching the wasteland. He who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying with a little patience. Now, these lines show complete hopelessness. Life and death are almost merging. The speaker here tries to, suggest that everyone is slowly dying, whether physically or spiritually, emotionally, or morally. Yet they continue to wait. So overall, the lines they show that the extreme dryness and despair of the modern world just before the thunder finally brings a message of hope. In this part, Elias gives us one of the most powerful images of the entire poem, that there is a world where there is no water, only rock. Water normally represents life, hope, and renewal, and rock, on the other hand, it represents dryness, harshness, and spiritual emptiness. So, Eliot is showing us a complete wasteland, which is physical wasteland as well as emotional wasteland. So there is, a repetition in the very beginning of the, this stanza. Here is no water but only rock, rock and no water and sandy road. So this repetition it emphasizes total dryness. There is nothing to nourish the body, or the soul, or the land. So the road winding above the among the mountains, which are mountains of rock without water, if there were water, we should stop and drink. Amongst the rock, one cannot stop or think. Sweat is dry, and feet are in the sand, dead mountain mouth of carries teeth and cannot spit. Here, one can neither stand nor lie nor sit. There's not even silence in the mountains, but dry, sterile thunder without rain. And there is not even solitude in the mountains, but red sullen faces sneer and snarl from doors of our mud cracked houses. So, the journey, the speaker is carrying out a journey, and that journey feels endless and hopeless. Even the mountains, which are usually, grand and majestic, they are barren. So now he expresses a desperate longing, and they are not, the speaker and the people on the way towards the mountain or on the journey, they are not asking for luxury, but just the basic water that is needed for survival. And the dryness is so extreme that it affects the mind also. That's why it says that amongst the rock one cannot stop or think, means there is no relief, no place to rest. And even sweat, a symbol of life, it has dried up and the body is exhausted. Here the mountain is compared to a mouth with rotten teeth. It's ugly, lifeless, unable to produce water. Means you cannot, if you don't have saliva in your, it's not, there's no saliva, you cannot really spit. So that's a vivid image of decay. And there is no comfortable or safe position. You cannot lie, you cannot sit. The absolute discomfort, physical and spiritual. Even the thunder, normally a sign of rainfall, is empty. And there is just noise without relief and promise without any kind of a fulfillment. Even here, you cannot escape people, but and the people you see are quite angry. Sullen faces, red sullen faces sneer and snarl, means these people are angry, hostile and suffering. Here this the word, the phrase here, mud cracked houses, they show extreme poverty and drying. So overall, if we see what is, it this stanza, it shows a world where there is no water, means there is no life. There is no spiritual water. There is no physical water, means no life. There is no spiritual water, it means there is no peace. There is no silence, no solitude, no comfort. It means it is, complete exhaustion. And thunder brings no rain. So hope is there, but it is quite ineffective. So Eliot uses this landscape to reflect the inner barrenness of modern society, where people feel spiritually empty, mentally exhausted, and emotionally disconnected. Eliot is showing a deep longing for water, which represents, as we have just studied it, life, hope, and spiritual renewal. The speaker imagines different possibilities. If only there were water. If only the water could exist alongside the rock. If only there were a spring or a pool. These repeated if statements shows desperation. The speaker is dreaming of relief that does not really exist. And there is a fantasy of refreshment in the middle of a harsh wasteland. When he says, no, a spring, a pool among the rock, and the sound of water over a rock. Even hearing water would bring comfort to them, not the cicada and dry grass singing. Instead of irritating sounds of a dry, lifeless environment, the speaker wants the soothing sound of flowing water, where the hermit thrush sings. The hermit thrush is basically a bird whose song symbolizes purity and spiritual peace. So this image shows that the speaker is yearning for a world where nature brings, comfort and healing. Then there is, sound, drip, drop, drip, drop. The repeated sound mimics water, which is a kind of a dream of what they desperately want, but they cannot have. So the final blow comes when the speaker says, "But there is no water." It's like the shattering of the dream, and the line is breaking the fantasy, and reality interrupts. The wasteland remains dry, empty, and spiritually dead. So it expresses deep desire for renewal, imagined relief that never comes. There is a contrast between hope, which is, with water, by thinking of water, and the harsh reality, of course, that's rocks, and the emotional exhaustion of the modern world. And water here becomes a symbol of salvation, but the repeated reminder, there is no water, it shows how distant such hope feels. In these lines, Eliot introduces a mysterious third figure who seems to walk beside the speaker and his companion. So there are only two people, but the speaker keeps sensing a third presence. So, actually, what is happening here? So it seems that the speaker counts only two travelers, himself and another person, but whenever he looks ahead, he sees a third figure walking with them. So this presence is quite mysterious, covered in a brown cloak and hood, and the speaker can't even tell whether it is a man or a woman. The the question, who is the third and who walks always beside you, creates a sense of spiritual mystery and even unease. Now, what does this, third figure symbolize? This stanza, it inspires by accounts of explorers, like who, during moments of extreme stress and exhaustion, felt a comforting, invisible companion walking with them. Eliot uses this idea to show that in the moment of crisis, people sense a spiritual presence guiding or protecting them. It may represent hope, faith, or even divine intervention. It signals that even in the wasteland, there is a possibility of help and renewal. So, overall, if we see, this third figure is a symbol of spiritual companionship when humans reach their limits. And it is the first sign, please note that hope or salvation may be returning to the wasteland. And it's a movement from despair towards spiritual awakening. We now reach one of the most powerful and haunting passages in the final section, What the Thunder Said. As I read these lines, imagine the entire emotional landscape unfolding through, just sound alone. So, what is that sound here? High in the air, murmur of maternal lamentation. So, here, Eliot begins with a mysterious sound. It's faint, it's distant, and it carries a deep instinctive sorrow. And when he says maternal lamentations, he evokes the cry of a grieving mother, a timeless, universal voice of pain. It feels as if the earth itself is mourning humanity's failures. The grief is collective, civilizational. Eliot doesn't describe the source clearly. He wants us to feel the vibration of a world in distress. And then he says, who are those hooded hordes swarming over endless pains? Now, the poem is shifting into a vast, desolate panorama We hear the movement of a faceless of faceless crowds who did hordes, moving without direction or identity. They seem like refugees escaping war, famine, or catastrophe, or they might symbolize the spiritually exhausted modern masses. And the land they cross is cracked earth, suggesting drought and barrenness. And the horizon, it stretches endlessly with nothing to break the monotony. There's no hope, no landmark, no promise, just exhaustion and survival. Then he further asks, what is the city over the mountains? Cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air. Now, Eliot gives us an uncanny vision of a city that does not stay still. It appears, it fractures, it reforms, it bursts again, almost like a hallucination, almost like a memory of civilization itself, unstable, flickering, unable to hold together. The violet air here suggests twilight. It's the time, it's an in between moment when the world feels fragile. History itself seems to be dissolving before our eyes, or rather before our ears. Falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London, unreal. And then Eliot lists the great cities of human civilization: Jerusalem, faith; Athens, philosophy; Alexandria, knowledge; Vienna, empire and culture; London, modern imperial power. Each one represents a different peak of human achievement, and Eliot shows them all falling, collapsing in a single moment, as though history were crumbling like, you know, it was crumbling like dried leaves. And the final word, unreal, is crucial because it has, appeared many times in the poem. It captures the modern condition. Unreal means that you really can't believe in whatever is happening in front of you. It is all, you know, it is all cannot be believed in. It's a sense that the world has become unstable. It's like a dreamlike and untrustworthy, as if the foundation of civilization are slipping away. So, in these lines, Eliot compresses centuries of history into a single apocalyptic vision, and he gives us a world that is not just physically barren but spiritually exhausted too. A world stumbling, grieving, and dissolving. Now, these lines move deeper into that hallucination, dream, and mythic distortion, and like a world where nothing feels quite real and everything feels slightly terrifying. So, there is a woman drew her long black hair out tight and fiddled whisper music on those strings. So, here Eliot creates an airy, almost ghostly figure. Imagine a woman pulling her long black hair straight and tight, and the hair itself becomes a kind of violin, and she plays whisper music on it. The image is quite uncanny. It blends beauty, of course, beauty with long, a woman with long black hair. So it blends. It is beautiful. It seems beautiful, but Eliot is blending beauty with strangeness, music with menace. And Eliot is showing us a world where the ordinary transforms into the unsettling. It also hints at seduction, at the sirens of myth, but also at the exhaustion and distortion of creativity in a broken world. And bats with baby faces in the violent light whistled and beat their wings. Now the scene has shifted from airy to grotesque. Bats appear, but not ordinary bats. They have baby faces. And the effect is deeply disturbing. You just imagine for once bats and babies. Bats cannot, you know, have a baby like innocent face. So it is, really disturbing. And the effect is deeply, disturbing. It's a classic piece of nightmare imagery. Creatures that look almost human but not quite familiar, yet wrong. So Eliot uses this to express the spiritual corruption of the modern world, where innocence has been twisted into something extremely frightening. And the violent violet light, that twilight tone we saw earlier, keeps everything dreamlike and it's unreal. And crawled head downward down a blackened wall. Means the bats, they're crawling downward head first along a charred or darkened wall. This reinforces the sense of a ruined post-apocalyptic landscape, and it's the world that has turned upside down, well, literally also, and of course symbolically. And upside down in air were towers, tolling reminiscent bells that kept the hours. So now even the architecture turns surreal. Surreal means when images pop up, then they do not really gel together, and it creates a dream-like imagery, and you can't really believe in that thing. So that is all surreal. Also, the towers, they are appearing upside down in the air like reflections or illusions. So even reality is no longer stable. Everything is shifting, inverted, dreamlike. The bells are reminiscent, meaning they just evoke memory, and memory of a stable past. Well, once there was a time when everything was stable, everything was there, and there was some kind of a certainty. But now everything has turned topsy turvy. The but now the bells ring in an unreal, uninverted world, and the time itself feels displaced, out of joint. So, this is actually Eliot's way of showing the modern crisis, a civilization remembering what it once was, but unable to recover it, and voices singing out of empty cisterns and exhausted wells. And this is one of the most powerful images. Cisterns and wells are symbols of water. We get water from it. Cisterns is basically tanks, water tanks. So we keep water in it, and water symbolizes life, renewal, spiritual nourishment. But, like, previously it was stated that water is just not that innocent anymore. So, Eliot, it describes them as empty, they're exhausted. There's no water left, means there is no inspiration, no sustenance. Yet voices still sing from them. This creates a ghost like echoing effect, songs coming from hollowness. Civilization is trying to speak, trying to keep its cultural memory alive, but the sources are dry. What to do? And the music of the past is now only an echo. So now in these lines, what did we see? That Eliot was trying to construct a landscape that is part nightmare, part memory, part hallucination, and everything is so distorted. What is distorted here? Music, animals, architecture, even time and sound. So it is the world at the edge of spiritual collapse, a world that remembers its former life but can no longer return to it. Now, students, we are entering one of the most atmospheric and symbolically loaded moments in the entire poem, the scene of the decayed chapel. And the tone is shifting from surreal nightmare to a quite airy desolation. In this decayed hole among the mountains, in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing. Eliot begins with a place that feels forgotten, abandoned, almost unreachable. It's, a place decayed hole among the mountains. It is a place that suggests some remote, ruined spot, and the site of something like a site of a spiritual collapse. So there is a faint moonlight, barely enough to see by. Yet the grass is singing. But students, this is not, literal singing. It is the whispering sound of wind moving through dry grass. Eliot uses this subtle, natural sound to create a mood of haunting stillness. Life persists, but only faintly. over the tumbled graves about the chapel. Now we realize this place is not just ruined, it is a graveyard. Tumbled graves means the earth has collapsed, headstones have fallen, everything is neglected. This is the death of the old order, old beliefs, old rituals, old structure of meaning. And at the center of it stands a chapel, or what used to be one. There is the empty chapel, only the winds hum. Students, please note that this is crucial. The chapel, which is usually considered a symbol of faith, community, or spiritual refuge, is now empty. There is no congregation, means nobody comes there to offer prayer. No priest is there, no ritual, no prayer, only wind lives inside it. And Eliot shows us this civilization that it has lost its spiritual center. It is a sacred place, you know, it's a sacred place, a sacred space with no sacred presence. It has no windows and the doors swing. But this is actually one of, I would say, where you can actually hear the breathing of a door, a swinging door, or a dying structure. The building is hollowed out. There are no windows, and the door swings loosely in the wind, open not out of welcome, but because nothing remains strong enough to hold it shut. This is what abandonment, you know, how abandonment is made audible. Here you can actually listen to how empty that chapel was. Means the swinging door is like a breath, it's a sigh, the last moment in a dying structure. And the dry bones can harm no one. And this particular lines echoes the Bible, particularly Ezekiel's the valley of dry bones. But unlike those dry bones which rose again, these dry bones are completely harmless because they are actually lifeless. So Eliot is suggesting that the past, including religious traditions, they have become like dry bone, and it can no longer threaten, but it can also no longer save anyone. Only a cock stood on the roof tree. Cocorico, cocorico. Now, Eliot introduces a single living creature, that's a rooster. And the rooster's cry, cocorico, is important. See, it is this symbol, this cry of a rooster is traditionally associated with the sound of dawn, morning. So it is a sign of awakening, a renewal, and resurrection. And in Christian symbolism, the rooster is associated with, with two things. One, on the negative side, it is associated with Peter's betrayal of Christ, and on the other hand, it is associated with the coming of the new day. So even in this desolate chapel, there is a faint flicker of hope, a small sign that renewal might still be possible. In a flash of lightning, then a damp gust, bringing rain. So here the scene shifts dramatically. There is lightning suddenly, and that lightning is intense, illuminating the ruined chapel for a moment. A burst of energy in a dead world. Then a damp gust, then rain. So after all the dryness, all the cracked earth, all the empty walls, and empty wells, rain finally appears. This is the first moment of true renewal in the entire poem. The rain symbolizes mercy, restoration, the possibility of spiritual rebirth. It is the transition from wasteland to regeneration. So, students, this passage took us from absolute desolation, means empty chapel, dry bones, tumbled graves, to the very first sign of hope. The rooster's cry, that's the sign of hope. The lightning and the arrival of rain, of course. It seems that Eliot is preparing us for the final moment of the poem, where the thunder finally speaks and offers its lessons. Now, students, we have reached the culminating point of this poem, and now Eliot has turned towards India, towards the Upanishads, and toward the symbolic arrival of rain and renewal. Ganga was sunken and the limp leaves waited for rain. Eliot begins with an image of the Ganga, which is not flowing, not really alive, but sunken, as if the river itself has dried or sunk into the earth. The leaves around it are limp, lifeless, waiting. Everything is in a state of anticipation. The land, the river, the vegetation, all are holding their breath for rain. This mirrors the poet's wider theme, a world spiritually depleted and awaiting renewal. While the black clouds gathered far distant over Himavant, means the black clouds they were gathering far away over the Himalayan region that is called Himavant. They promise rain, but the rain hasn't arrived yet. There is a hope in the distance, but not yet in the present moment. So Eliot is creating this tension deliberately, that the world is on the edge of transformation, but still in a state of dryness and longing. The jungle crouched, hummed in silence. When this line is wonderfully atmospheric, the jungle almost becomes an animal, crouching, waiting, listening. Nature is tense, expectant, silent. Everything, everything in the nature is waiting for the thunder to speak. And this is the moment just before revelation. Then spoke the thunder, Da. Now the thunder speaks. This is the turning point. Da comes from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where the thunder speaks the same syllable to the gods, the humans, and the demons, and each group hears it differently. The thunder speech represents divine instruction, a way out of the wasteland. First thunder command, Data. What have we given? The first meaning of Da is Data, which means give. This is about generosity, self sacrifice, letting go. Eliot now turns inward, speaking almost confessional lines. Confessional line means as if he's talking to himself and he's talking about himself. My friend, blood shaking my heart, the awful daring of a moment's surrender, which an age of prudence can never retract. Here, Eliot describes a moment of genuine emotional or spiritual risk. It's a moment when someone gives themselves fully. It could be love, mercy, generosity, vulnerability. This moment requires courage, awful daring. It stands in contrast to a lifetime of caution and restraint. Eliot suggests that our true humanity is defined by these rare, daring moments of surrender and love, not by our careful, sensible lives. By this, and this only, we have existed. This is the one of the most important lines in the entire poem. Human existence, Eliot says, is justified by the moments when we give ourselves, when we act selflessly, when we surrender pride or fear. These are the moments that truly matter, which is not to be found in our obituaries or in memories draped by the beneficent spider or under seals broken by the lean solicitor in our empty rooms. Well, here Eliot is contrasting authentic human experience with the cold, bureaucratic records that remain after death. Though these precious moments of surrender, they don't appear in obituaries. Means when a person dies, then whatever is written after or is spoken in the praise of that person, in the memory of that person, we call them obituary, right? Aren't preserved in dusty memories, won't be found in legal documents or in the papers left behind in empty rooms. They are not the things that, things society records, but they are the things that make life meaningless, make life meaningful, you know. In a world filled with spiritual dryness, this kind of giving, data or datta, is the first step towards renewal. Dayadvam and the Miyata. These are the second and third teachings. So we have already heard the first syllable, Datta, which means give. Now the thunder speaks again. Da, Dayadvam means be compassionate. I've heard the key. Turn in the door once and turn. Turn once again only. Eliot begins with an image of a key turning in a lock. It turns once and only once. This sound suggests, you know, finality, a door closing, a separation, a moment of isolation. It is the sound of being shut away, either in guilt, in memory, or in emotional imprisonment. We think of the key, each in his prison, thinking of the key, each confirms a prison. Means, this is one of the most powerful psychological insights in the poem. Eliot says each of us sits in our own private prison. When a prison of ego is there, loneliness, trauma, guilt, fear, or past wounds. And when we think about escape, when we obsess over the key, we actually confirm the prison. We reinforce it. The idea here is that students, dayatvam, is that compassion breaks this isolation. To feel for others is to break out of the self made cell. Eliot is saying your prison is not the locked room. Your prison is the self absorbing only itself. Compassion is the key that opens the door. Only at nightfall, ethereal rumors revive for a moment a broken Coriolanus. Now, Coriolanus, the tragic figure from Shakespeare, he represents pride, isolation, and spiritual fragmentation. It's a man who is cut off from his own people. So Eliot imagines only faint, ghost-like rumors at night reviving him for just a moment. This is a brief glimmer of identity, a brief spark of human connection in a world where compassion has largely collapsed. This moment reminds us that without compassion, we are broken, and with compassion, even the broken can return to life. So, Dayadvam is the thunder urging humanity to reconnect emotionally. Da, the Miyata, control, self discipline, mastery. Now the thunder speaks for the third time. The Miyata, the boat responded gaily to the hand expert with the sail and oar. Here, Eliot gives us a new image, a boat controlled by a skilled hand. The boat responds joyfully, smoothly, lightly. This is a metaphor for the human heart and this human mind or even society itself. So, Damyata means self control, but it doesn't mean that harsh repression. It means guided, harmonious mastery over oneself. The boat moves well because the hand knows what it's doing. There's cooperation between the human and the element. The sea is calm. The sea was calm. Your heart would have responded gaily when invited, beating obedient to controlling hands. Now Eliot makes the metaphor explicit, very clear. Just as the sea stays calm under skilled navigation, the human heart responds joyfully when properly directed. There is harmony between emotion and discipline. The controlling hands are not authoritarian, they are steady, wise, gentle. They represent self discipline, moral direction, emotional balance, and the guidance we need to live well. Eliot is saying when we learn to guide our impulses, our fears, our desires, our hearts can move with ease, joy, and rhythm. So, this is the third lesson of the thunder. Master the self, not through force, but through harmony. So, let's put these three teachings together. These three thunder syllables reflect three spiritual roads out of the wasteland. Data means give, means open your heart, learn generosity, dare to surrender. Dayadvam, be compassionate, break the walls of your private prison, feel for others. Damyata, control, guide your life with steady, wise hands, create harmony within yourself. So, these three teachings are the antidote to the spiritual dryness that dominates the poem. I sat upon the shore, fishing, with the arid plain behind me. The speaker, which is often interpreted as Tracius or Eliot's poetic persona, sits on the shore trying to catch something. Symbolically, it can mean that they were trying to catch meaning, renewal, or spiritual sustenance. And the arid plain means a rough plain or dry plain behind him refers to the spiritual barrenness of modern civilization. And fishing becomes a metaphor for searching for wisdom or redemption. Shall I at least set my lands in order? A moment of introspection, even if the world cannot be saved. Can the individual at least restore inner order? Echoes the theme of personal responsibility in a chaotic world. And students focus on this line. This is, a reference to the traditional English nursery rhyme. London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. So it symbolizes the collapse of Western civilization after war, moral decay, and spiritual emptiness. Eliot uses the childish rhyme ironically to express cultural disintegration. So next phrase is, it's in Italian from Dante's Paradiso. It's from Canto 6, and it literally translates as "Then he hid himself in the fire that purifies them." This line is about purification through suffering. It suggests a hope that the soul may be refined or redeemed. Now, the next phrase is a mixture of Latin and English. The Latin phrase means, "When shall I become like the swallow?" I'll read it again. "When shall I become like the swallow?" From the from an ancient Roman poem. And the swallow represents return, spring, and rebirth. So this repeated oh swallow, it echoes Tennyson, Lord Alfred Tennyson. It symbolizes longing for renewal. Renewal, okay? So next is from a French by, and the poet's name is Gerard de Nevrals. And it literally translates as, "I am the prince of Aquitaine in his ruined tower." So it's a symbol of noble spirit surrounded by ruins. Eliot identifies with this image, a poet, who is standing amid the wreckage of civilization. So these are the fragments that I have showed against my ruins. This is again a very one of the most famous lines in modern poetry. And the poem itself is composed of fragments, quotations, broken voices, myths. So speaker tries to show or support his crumbling inner world with these cultural pieces. It suggests that art is a temporary defense against spiritual collapse. Why then fit you? Hieronymo's mad again. So this is a direct reference to Thomas Gibbs' Spanish tragedy, spoken by the character Hieronymo, who goes insane after tragedy. It reflects the speaker's awareness of his own mental strain and the chaotic nature of the world. And it adds a a theatrical or self-aware tone. I will give you what you want. Madness? A performance? So this is the the afterlines of these lines. Data, Deyadvam, Damyata. Again, from that Upanishad, the thunder speaks these three commands. Data means give, Deyadvam means be compassionate, and Damyata means exercise self-control. So, according to Hindu philosophy, these are keys to restoring order in human life. And the last one, and Sanskrit shloka, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. It's traditional Sanskrit ending of the Upanishads, which means the peace which passeth understanding. Eliot ends with a prayer-like chant, offering hope of spiritual peace after disorder. So this piece gathers global cultural fragments. It is not just England that is feeling this kind of a fragmentation, but it is the entire Europe, entire world. Dante from Italy, the nursery rhymes from England, Sanskrit from, of course, India, Latin, Italy, Nerval was a French, poet, Kid, again English, to show the breaking apart of modern civilization and the poet's attempt to rebuild meaning. And the ending moves from fragmentation to a spiritual possibility, suggesting that peace may still be attainable through three words: Data, Dayadvam, and Damyata, means giving, compassion, and self control. Thank you.